Well, it has long been said that Nicodemus Tessin the Younger's grand project for the surroundings of the royal palace was completely forgotten after the death of Charles XII. However, this is not true. Just have in mind Tessin's magnificent engraved work, Arx Regia, that was completed just until the early years of the 1750s by Jean-Erik Rehn, probably on the initiative of Carl Gustav Tessin to honor his father. Even though this work never contained any engraving of the entire project, one could sense Tessin's grandiose plans. We also know that the young eccentric Per Tam of Daxnäs made a copy of it in the 1760s. A decade later on, Tessin's old project caught the interest of Gustav III, who ordered the young architect, Olof Tempelman, to make a copy in 1774. However, before going into the topic of the revival of the architecture of the absolute monarchy, I will try to summarize a bit what my colleague Lars Ljungström has written as an introduction to the architecture in Stockholm from Rococo to the Gustavian period. And it's quite contradictory that the Baroque palace dedicated to the glory of the monarchic rule was mainly erected during the Swedish Age of Liberty. Meanwhile, the interiors saw the introduction of the pure French Rococo style by Carl Horleman. The Royal Palace in Stockholm, inaugurated in 1754, was the most important mark of artistic creation of the Rococo and its impact within Sweden. Else, just a couple of monumental buildings were erected, but the town witnessed two devastating fires, one in the parish of Klara in 1751, and the other one in Maria Magdalena 8 years later on. And as a result, the new expansion was mainly concentrated to Norrmalm, and not least the area around the Royal Garden and Blasieholmen. And among the few private palaces built during the period, Lars Ljungström mentions the Fersen Palace on the Blasieholmen, designed by Horleman for the Count Fredrik Axel von Fersen after his return from France in 1749. What is particularly striking is the very simple character of the facades that reminds us of fortification architecture. The only ornaments are the rusticated basement and the corners of the building. Another prominent and original feature was the terrace versus the royal palace. Today, not much is left of the Rococo architecture since it was completely covered by the eclectic 19th century so-called Södernsvenska palatset. It's astonishing that the court painter Johan Pasch managed to build a private house more or less of the same dimensions as the Fersen Palace at Mäster Samuelsgatan, and it was also designed in the same manner by Horleman. Another characteristic that soon appeared during the same period was the pleasure houses or follies in the outskirts of Stockholm. Svindersvik at Nacka, designed by Horleman and built around 1740 for one of the richest people in Sweden, Klaus Grill. Another quite exclusive example was the Chinese Pavilion Drottningholm, probably designed as a joint venture between Horleman and the king himself, Adolf Fredrik. It was made of prefabricated elements in Stockholm and sent by boat to Drottningholm and erected as a birthday surprise gift to the Queen Louise Ulrika in July 1753. A decade later on, it was moved to another spot and replaced by a permanent small palace designed by Carl Fredrik Adelkrantz. It repeated the outlay of Palladios villas, but got its ornament and inspiration from both German exoticized architecture and chambers designs of Chinese buildings and furniture. The phenomenon with villas or Italianized casinos continue throughout the 18th century. Haga is the most famous example, though Gustav III never really could decide whether he wanted a small pavilion or a grandiose palace. Among the very few monumental public buildings to be erected during the very end of the Age of Liberty and the beginning of the Gustavian era were the Stock Exchange and Adolf Fredrik Church. The first designs for the Stock Exchange was first carried out in the late 1760s by the young Erik Palmstedt in cooperation with two elderly architects Johan Eberhard Karlberg and Carl Johan Kronstedt, and then on its own. The round corners and slender architectural elements were all typical characteristics of the transitional style between Rococo and Neoclassicism, and the whole ensemble was first completed in 1777. The other example, the Adolf Fredrik Church, is less impregnated by the Rococo. It has more in common with strict and simple fortification architecture that could be seen in Karlskrona, and one of the major sources was the Church of Admiralty by Horleman. However, there was an oddity, a small cupola in Rococo, copied from Saint-Sulpice in Paris, that Adolfs soon removed and substituted with a more grandiose cupola. Now we will turn again to the so-called rediscovery of Nicodemus Tessin the Younger's project for the surroundings of the royal palace. With the revival of the absolute monarchy in 1772, there also emerged a new interest in Tessin's plan. This is why Gustav III ordered Olof Tempelman to make a copy in 1774. Meanwhile, the king planned for the huge public opera house. It was situated at Norrmalmstorg, the present Gustav Adolfs torg, and as a focal point, the king decided to place the Equestrian monument of Gustav Adolfs by Pierre Hubert L'Archevêque. The full-scale wax model was complete in 1778 and cast the following year at Midsummer. Unfortunately, it was a failure because it had to be repaired by Sergel and his collaborators until 1796. 2 years later on, in 1781, Carl Fredrik Adolfs made the designs for a bridge from the royal palace to Norrmalmstorg called Norrbro, a bridge that wasn't completed until 1806. The following year, in 1782, the king decided both to start the work on the embankment of the quay, as well as the plan for the Prince's Palace. We can see to the right here on this view by Louis-Jean Desprez. The sister of Gustav III, Sophia Albertina, had lived with her mother, the Dowager Queen, in Fredriksholm Palace until her death in July 1782. So thus, the king envisaged a complete milieu that fully organized the quite chaotic area between the royal palace and Norrmalm. Before going into details of the opera house and the area behind, I will just mention the great shift in Gustav III's architectural ideals that took place during and after the king's travel to Italy in 1783-84. Just to give two examples, the new designs for the St. John Church, originally conceived by Jean-Éric Rehn, and then converted into a more up-to-date taste in the Greek manner by the French architect Léon Dufourny in Rome in 1784. The Royal Mint was originally designed with a quite modest facade by Adolfs. However, the king wanted a reference to his favorite archaic temples in Paestum, and thus the old director of public works, Baron Adolfs, was forced to add several heavy Greek columns to the facade of Royal Mint. When the Opera House was inaugurated in 1782, it represented a landmark in the cityscape. The grouping of the facade has a clear similarities with the French Royal Mint. You can see here. The Hôtel de la Monnaie in Paris, designed by Jacques Denis Antoine. Even though the architecture is an example of distinct classicism with resting proportions and strongly marked contours, the Rococo aversion to clearly defined volume live on with the cut off at the angles. A cross-section of the building shows both an ultra-modern theatre building from acoustics to the machinery and a need for space, not least the decorated stores and studios crowding from the beginning to small rooms high up under the roofs. Another consequence of the construction of the Opera House was the formation of the area behind as an experimental site for visionary ideas about turning the Arsenalsplatsen into an English garden. When the king gave the commission to the architect Frederick Magnus Piper, who had recently returned from England, it can be assumed that the important prerequisite was the demolition of the old 17th century Magnus Palace. In both his designs, Piper proposed a large lawn of irregular oval shape, surrounded by winding meandric walks and dense plantings of shrubs and trees. The sight lines to the quay are each terminated by an alcove or a covered garden bench, in order to avoid the obstacle posed by the route of Arsenalsgatan between Kungsträdgården and Arsenalsgården. Piper envisaged an underground passage in the form of a cave, a clear reference to Pope's famous grotto at Twickenham outside London, which in a similar way formed an underground passage under the road to London. When Queen Dowager died in July 1782, the king's confidant, Count Kreutz, said that, Sire, I propose now that Fredrikshof is no longer used by the royal family. You could place the arsenal there and at the same time demolish the old building, in other words, Makalös, in order to extend the king's garden with a park. Kreutz's idea of creating a continuous green belt from Nybroviken to Strömmen was undoubtedly a very radical one. The creation of an English park at Arsenalsgården was also one of the projects that Gustav III decided on in 1784, at the same time as the arsenal was moved to Fredrikshof. But when the newly arrived French scenographer Louis-Jean Desprez needed a home and a studio at the autumn of the same year, the demolition of Makalös didn't happen. The old palace was left standing, and therefore the plans for an English park became obsolete. Still, the location of Makalös prevented any thought of renewing the area behind the Opera House. Gustav III's interest seems to have shifted to Kungsträdgården, probably preparing the celebration of the Peace of Versailles in 1790. Frederick Magnus Piper drew up a proposal for a new entrance and wall around the garden. However, it is not known how the rest of the garden would be remodeled. It took another 6 years, but it now included the entire garden. Contrary to what might have been expected, Pipers chose to retain the contours of the old Baroque layout, but individual parts were greatly simplified. The central parterre and flower quarters had been reduced to an oval lawn, bordered by flower beds and intersected by a walkway. This section was in turn flanked by a box-like planting, divided by diagonal paths radiating from the lawn. Well, we will we will end now where we started, at the Royal Palace. And to be more precise, the small tiny garden called Logården. Tessin had in mind a formal garden with parterres, fountains and sculptures, but nothing ambitious was really done here until the very end of the 18th century. Then the whole spot was converted into a wild English park with dense vegetation and winding paths on a very small area. For Frederick Magnus Piper, who had been the one to introduce the English landscape park in Sweden in its mature form, the development must have seemed very strange. As a professional architect, he had come to the conclusion that the buildings in an urban environment should be accompanied by regularly shaped gardens. The most harsh criticism of this layout came perhaps unexpectedly from Piper's antagonist, the architect and scenographer Louis-Jean de Pré. In a major urban planning proposal in 1803, he denounced the new English park at Logården as an aberration. De Pré emphasized the regular architecture should be accompanied by a regular garden art. This was the end of the most optimistic belief in the possibilities of the new garden fashion. That the site happened to be the Royal Palace in Stockholm, Tessin's grand architectural project, is a curious historical irony. Thank you very much.